Welcome back to the show, everybody. We have got a return guest with us, Jim Willis, author of American Cults, Cabals, Corruption, and Charismatic Leaders. Actually, it was really, really cool how we came upon this, because I would actually lined up a couple of shows dealing around this subject, and all of a sudden I find out about this book, and it was just like perfect synchronicity. And I was like, I actually used it for the Into the Outer Realms show I was on when we did one on some of the cults that we had there. So it actually came in really, really handy for some of the research I did. So, appreciate that to Jim Willis. That's Visible Ink Press is the publisher on that. So as always, brought to you by Radio. Go to Mixler.com and set up an account there, free. You can listen to our show. There's a sponsor right there, Ron, chiming in. How are you, sir? Yeah, just go set up the account. He's got several lineup of shows, including ours, Into the Outer Realms. We're rebroadcast every Wednesday at 11 p.m. So check that out. ERRT Radio. Thanks to them for being the proud sponsor. So like I said, cults. Why do people join these? Why do they form? It really boils down to most people. They have an inherent need it's a natural sense to belong. You want to belong to something. You have to belong to. We naturally look for a leader. You naturally look for somebody to take the reins, steer here. But why do some people go to the point to where I must sleep with this guy in order to find salvation? Why do I have to give up all my worldly possessions in order for me to feel free? Why does it get to this point? How does somebody go from just going to church, giving a few bucks on the plate, getting everything, coming out, or you have somebody that just completely walks away from their family? So when we have Jim, we're going to be talking about this. It's going to be a fascinating one. I've really taken a liking to this subject, dealing with the cults. So everybody sit back. Jim Willis is next. Welcome to the Three Beards podcast. My name's Craig, along with Austin and Chris.
Passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century.
Let me out.
I'm afraid that is white.
Justice and honor in Massachusetts colony?
All right, Chris and Brian are here.
Yes, we are.
We're not quite sure what happened to the Austin. We're not sure what happened to Ginger Squatch. He might be here. He might not. He's not here. What do we do? I don't know.
What do we do? We go find him.
So he's not here. So hopefully one of these times somebody will drag him in.
I gotta be honest. I gotta thank those guys. If he's in the fire department, those boys came over and saved my life last Thursday. So take your time, Ginger.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's glad to. All jokes aside, it is awesome to have you here with us, sir.
It's good to be here.
Chris
went. Chris is gone now.
Yeah, he's there. But let's bring on in the green room here. We're going to make ourselves kind of official that we have a green room. Yeah. Let's bring on Jim. How are you, sir?
Real good.
Applause.
Four beards together again, huh?
And 3 for a moment because Chris just dropped off. Yeah. Like I said, author of American Cults, Cabals, Corruption, and Charismatic Leaders.
Awesome.
Yeah, we had you back. Had you on Censoring God, if I'm
That's
correct. Yep,
right.
that was a fantastic book, and too as well. And so I highly recommend everybody go check that one out as well. So, what led you to go from censoring God to focusing on the other aspect? Was it just, did you kind of stick with the religious thing? Like, how does this come about, and go to the extreme side?
Well, the simplistic answer is it kind of helps to have a publisher call you up and say, "Would you do a book on cult?" But it was something that I was ready to do. There was a time back in the 70s when Jim Jones was big, when Jimmy Swaggart was big, when who was the other Jim back there? Jim Baker. Jim Baker and the 700 Club. And I began to wonder, all these ministers named Jim. Scary a little bit. So I've just been kind of with it. But no, I've been a pastor of a Christian church until I retired, which 15 years ago. I was active in the Christian church, and of course, a lot of cults have come out of the Christian church. So I was very familiar with the subject. In one sense, it was fun to write this book because it was literally a whole lifetime of study, and I love the craft of writing. And I love to have to be able to write a book knowing that you've got a publisher really interested in it, who's going to do the right thing by you and everything else. And so that was fun. But I've got to say, boy, at the end of about 6 months of writing, oh man, I was so depressed. I want to tell you, it was a really a labor of love in one sense, and it was nice to be able to purge all this stuff, get it out. On the other hand, it was a real difficult subject to write about because there's a saying in religion, that cult plus time equals religion. Basically, every single, people talk about cults, and it's natural in this day and age in our culture to have a negative connotation right away. But it's amazing the groups that were cults. Take the Christian church. Theologians look at the early Christian church, and they call it a Jesus cult embedded in Judaism, and that's just pretty much what it was when it started out. It was a group of people who followed a charismatic follower and were willing to give up their lives for him and everything else. And so that it was called a Jesus cult. And it was a long time before Christianity cut itself off from Judaism. We read about it in the book of Acts when Peter and Paul were having the big fight. Peter said, "Yeah, you can be a Christian, but first you got to become Jewish." And Paul was saying, "No, let's open it up to everybody." And it was really tough. On the other hand, I used to live up in New England, and all the history books talk about the Puritans coming over, and we have all these wonderful, wonderful stories about the Puritans were seeking religious freedom. Well, in a way, they were kicked out. They were a cult. They were called separatists. And they came here to America to build a new Jerusalem, a city on a hill. And it really didn't work out that much. And I'm seeing Chris make the signs here. I'm not sure.
Oh, no, I had to mute him. There's a loud clicking coming from his side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Chris, whatever you're doing, stop. There's a loud click. I don't know if it's your mouse. It's drowning out over all the audio. All you hear is this. So that's why I had to mute it.
See, that's how cults begin, Chris. Right?
Yeah.
No, so the early Puritans, they came here, and everybody was thinking, they're great, far-seeing Christian people and everything else, but boy, as soon as they came over here and set up a town, they started acting like a cult. They started saying it's our way or the highway. They started burning witches at the stake. Even their charismatic ministers like Cotton Mather attended the Salem witch trials and never said a thing about stopping them. And so when you get right down to it, it's really difficult to define exactly what a cult is, especially when you look back in history and see how so many of them what so many groups which are right now considered normal religious groups began as cults. And it's not just in religion either. You find it in business, you find it in politics, you find it in economics, you find it in sports teams even, it's just all over the place. And so when I started to write the book, it was really kind of fun at the beginning, because I very soon into it, I realized I've got to cut this down. The book is going to be huge. So I had to limit it to American cults. And then I had to limit it to some probably of the best known cults, either or that stayed cults through to the end or began as cults and then went on to become religion. So it's really tough, but it was fun, and I enjoyed it.
So you said something earlier before we get too far ahead that I would like to ask a question about. Were you getting depressed in the writing the book, or you were just to the point where you wanted to hurry up and finish it? Like, was the talking about the cults depressing you, or it was
I was talking about the cults. When you're dealing, and some of these cults that I cover are granted, I had to pick probably the ones that were not only the most well known, but the ones that are most notorious for acting out certain kinds of activity. And boy, when you delve that deep into the psychology of who we are, and every once in a while you look at yourself and you say that that could be me. A lot of people like to think that, well, I could never be caught into a cult, maybe my neighbor could, but I couldn't do that. On the other hand, there but for the grace of God go all of us. In our moments of vulnerability, you can almost bet that there are cults out there that want to find you.
NXIVM is one of those.
Oh yeah,
I mean that pulled in Hollywood stars.
Yeah.
I mean the Sullivans. I think wasn't that Judy Collins? Wasn't she in the involved in the Sullivans cult?
Wow, I haven't heard that in ages. But yeah, I think you're right about the Sullivans.
Yeah, there's just some of these ones where it's just people think, nah. It's like and you wouldn't realize there's actually some major names that get caught up in this one. I want to say we did the one. It's the Children of God. That one had. Oh God, come on! If I hadn't tried to think about it, Joaquin Phoenix. Mm-hmm. He was part of it, and also Rose McGowan.
Wasn't his family part? The Phoenix family line was based kind of a cult. They were cultist for the most part, and another cult, and he drifted from that to that other. We were just
I can't remember. I mean,
they both grew up in like a Child of God communion style cult.
The Children of God.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I had to be really careful about, and I do write about all these different cults in the book, but one of the things that I think we all have to be careful about probably is I don't like to particularly label groups cults anymore. I prefer to talk about cultic methodology, cultic methods.
Yeah, there's Judy Collins.
Yeah, right.
Yep. So yeah, she was attracted to Sullivans. Yeah, and that was one of the way I did it. I lined out my notes for that. Is going on your methodology.
Yeah.
So we're on the same page.
The methods they use are used in a lot of different ways. Businesses, for instance, will use weekends, retreats. And I just think about it. You say you're going to go to I don't know. In the book, I talk about, for instance, Amway, and I talk about Mary Kay, and how they work their weekends. You get invited to come to this group, and you're right out in the parking lot. You get people meeting you, and they're shaking your hand, and they're smiling, and you're on the same page with them, and it's so exciting. You're saying, these are my kind of people. And you go inside the building, which is all set up, and the music is pumping, and it's getting you all jazzed up, and people are singing along and swaying along and sitting out there. And then the testimonies come on of people who were in this group and in this particular organization, and how they started out with $1.50 and they wound up with $3 million in a pink Cadillac, that kind of thing. And their testimony after testimony after testimony, and they give you that you can do this too, and you're absolutely convinced. And then as the music really comes to a great thing comes the talented talker, the keynote speaker. He comes out and he gives this message, and he really fires you up. And so you go out of that place and, oh, I'm going to miss these people. I had a wonderful weekend. These are my family, my kind of people. And so then you go home and you try it and it doesn't work, and you get discouraged, and then you start calling people up. What do I do? Well, it must be your fault. They start laying the guilt on you. Can't be the organization. It's if you follow their techniques, you can do it too, because you saw all those speakers. And so you go and pretty soon the guilt is there, and then pretty soon it's, well, maybe you're spending too much time with your family. They're holding you back. Maybe you better spend more time with us, and learn more and spend a little more money and buy the starter kit and invest in the company, and then you'll make it. And you're constantly trying and trying and trying. This is the cultic methodology. And if it sounds familiar, remember, I was a church pastor for 40 years. The same thing goes on in church. You go into a church and there's music playing, and there's people who are of like minds, and especially if it's a revival or something like that in the church, and they're looking for new members.
Synchronicity.
Yeah.
Charles just commented that.
Oh,
yeah, he literally just commented as you were saying it. I'm like, wow, look at that.
And
that was tuned.
I say this because I don't know what else I could have done, but I even used some of this methodology. I mean, I was the speaker, and we had the music. We had either the organ music if it was a formal service, or we had the praise bands, and the people would come in and they would be swaying and singing and doing all this stuff. And you can do it. And then, by the way, here's the collection plate.
I was going to say, you got to get to that crescendo, and then that's when the plate's got to start coming around as everybody's.
Yeah. And to be honest, I don't know how I could have done it any different. Whenever you get people together, you have the opportunity of, some people are going to be leading, and some people are going to want to be followers. Why do people go to church? Why do people join business? Why do people join any kind of a cult? It's because they're at a feeling of vulnerability. They're feeling discouraged. They're feeling alone. There are something like between 3,000 and 5,000 cults in the United States right now, according to the latest figures that I've read. And it's a manipulative kind of thing, and it's very, very difficult to escape it. Whenever you've got people who want to be leaders, and people who want to be followers, and people who need what the group is giving, they need it in their life, they want it in their life, and it's this kind of cultic mythology. That's why I'm not comfortable calling certain organizations cults. I like to say, don't call the organization a cult, because then you're going to be arguing about the definition of a cult. Instead, look at their methods, see how they operate. And if they operate with cultic methods or cultic mythology, then if it quacks like a duck and swims like a duck, it's probably a duck. I don't care what it is, whether it's a business or a church or a religion group or anything, like that. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible thing, and it's a part of our human condition. And quite frankly, I don't see it getting any better in this day and age, because COVID helped us more than anything else to discover this great culture of loneliness. And it's just people are. I heard today that there is a epidemic, the doctors are calling it, of loneliness and suicide in America's youth today. They feel more cut off than ever, and they're just open up to this kind of activity. Meet my needs, and cults do that at the beginning. They meet your needs. Of course, the big thing you have to look for, if you're ever wondering about whether a group tends toward cults or not, is you have to look at the leader. Leaders of cults are generally either narcissists or psychopaths, and there's a difference. There's a difference between the two. A narcissist can generally at least feel a little bit of empathy, perhaps, but they feel entitled. They feel grandiose. That's why so many cult leaders say they're not only a cult leader, they're not only a person, they're God incarnate and that kind of thing. They are at the center, not only of their own story, but everyone else's. And
I think Osho was a lot like that from the Rajneeshis. He was because it got to that point where it was all about the Rolls Royces.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
You know,
Look
it
at
was just the rose petals on the road as his
yeah,
Rolls
yeah,
Royce came running through. Yeah, it was
yeah,
all about,
yeah, yeah.
the
Well,
image.
but
But that,
you'll find them in political parties too, and you'll find them in business, and you'll find everything else. The one who really lacks any real empathy displays unmistakable arrogance. They're normally in search of validation themselves, but of course they never like to say that. They might feel at least a small sense of shame when they do wrong, and it's only when they get caught. The only reason they're usually worried about it is because it undermines their self-esteem. But
Wow.
there's a difference, because a lot of cult leaders grow up from narcissists to psychopaths. And
yeah,
psychopaths are a strange psychological condition. They don't feel any shame. That's why most people don't realize this, but genuine psychopaths can usually pass lie detector tests because they honestly feel they can do no wrong. They are the ones performing the deeds, and if they're doing it, it must be good. So if you're ever associated with anybody, even a friend who's not a cult at all, but if there's just a friend who manipulates by saying, oh, I'm only saying this for your own good, or, oh, you always act this way. Those kinds of statements on steroids is what makes a cult leader.
yeah.
And
Craig,
when
you could
you
be a perfect cult leader. You could. You,
Beardoism.
Question for you for a moment, Jim,
The
before
cult.
we keep going further. Coming from the religious background and the
Mhm.
ministry and or your, I don't know if it was a ministry, what you were
Mhm.
doing.
Yeah, I
It
was
does
pastor.
come a point where you are doing what you're doing and you're actually trying to help people. And then what happens is I think both ends of the leadership as well as the follower,
Yeah.
they have a moment where they're a little bit of epiphany. I'm like, oh my God, I really helped this. I connected with this person.
Yeah.
When does it go from I connected and you got something yourself back for, to
Yeah.
help, like let's keep doing this, to make sure you get all their money out of their bank account by the end of, by 5 o'clock. Or let's have,
Yeah.
make sure their children come to my room or whatever.
Mm.
There is a weird line there, isn't it?
Somewhere there's a line, and you really have to be careful when you're in a position of leadership like that. Yeah, even in the college classroom, I was a college professor, and I was teaching a subject that I only got the best students. Let's face it. I was teaching comparative religion, world religions. Nobody takes that because they have to. They take it because they want to. So I had the best students. They all were there because they wanted to be there. But you get up there and you lecture and you talk and you get them involved, and pretty soon they start putting you up on a pedestal. Oh, Professor Willis, or oh, Reverend Willis, or whatever. He does this, or let's do this, let's do that. And you have to be constantly looking at yourself and saying, wow, careful, Jim, don't go too far. You're just a guy who happens to have studied one particular subject, and when people start to idolize you, and in the as pastor of a church, it can be really tough. There are a lot of pastors out there. You see them on television all the time, that are real, basically cult leaders, my way or the highway,
Does his
And
last name rhyme with Hopeland by any chance?
I won't get into that.
Just say it. Does it rhyme with hope and land? I'm just,
But
Yeah,
isn't that the truth?
and it's power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The more power you give your leaders, they I really respect a lot of these people in the past, for instance, who resisted the the call to become famous in their own right by insisting that, for instance, there have been pastors. Billy Graham is a classic example, who said, I will never ever be in a room alone with a woman who's not my wife. I just won't do it. I will never ever collect the money. I'll always be on a salary. So there's a board over me setting my salary. And because, boy, they could be, a religious leader wielding that kind of power with that kind of money. I mean, just look at what Jim Baker became, or look at what Jimmy Swaggart became. All about me, and it moves away and from the original ideas of the founders of religions, and down the road, pretty soon you got cults. It's a real fertile land to grow
and then
a narcissist.
That comment right there that kind of dovetails pretty good with what you just said. Is there a law of diminishing returns regarding cult size? So like these churches where they seem to get to a size and then they almost seem to have this collapse.
Implode. Yeah.
And so does that seem like that seems to be a case? Like if they grow too much, the leader just can't maintain that same charisma, that same pull?
The classic example is to look at Guyana, the Jim Jones organization, all those people who committed suicide, some of them voluntarily, but a lot of them who were forced to. And the reason he had them do that was because they were all about to leave. They were, they went down there to start Jonestown. They were going to start a heaven on earth, and it was hell on earth down there. It was terrible. And a lot of people wanted to leave. And rather than have them leave, Jim Jones became more of an autocrat, and when he was about to lose his following, he said, "Okay, you're all going with me," and they all committed suicide. What, 900 or something like that?
Yeah, it was a lot, and it was. And some of these leaders, like when you get them, like Heaven's Gate is one of them.
That was another one. Suicide.
And he was unlike most of them because he went in the second wave.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of them, they're just like, well, I'm going to make sure that everybody goes, and I'll be. No,
I'll
he
be
was
right
like,
behind you guys.
yeah. What's that?
I've got my keys inside.
Yeah.
I've got my keys. I'll be right back.
So the first wave went, and then he was part of the second wave to follow the program. So there was a few of them that they definitely did not follow your stereotypical, where it was just the psychopath that wanted people to kill, and then they're like, well, I just got another message from God, and we were wrong. I need to persist.
Well, you can see the same thing in the entertainment business, though. A lot of these, we say he acts like a rock star. Well, a rock star is a typical type cult leader if he or she follows that thing, because you're living in a different world. You like to think, oh, I came from the streets, or I came from the common people, but boy, you get that kind of adulation. Thousands of people cheering you and giving you money, and you got the money and you got the cars, and pretty soon you get slighted if you don't get the preferential treatment that you're used to, and all this kind of thing. And it's a really tough thing, and it can lead to a violent end. Jaron just talked about Ruby Ridge and Waco. Both of those wound up with a terribly violent end. And Waco especially was a classic study in how not to deal with a cult. Here you had the leader of the group out there was talking about Armageddon is coming. They're coming for us. Whoever they are. And part of it was the government and all this kind of stuff. And what's going to happen with Armageddon? Oh, there will be noise and confusion, and there will be tornadoes and thunder and earthquakes in diverse places, and there will be war and rumor of war, and we better get ready for it by arming ourselves to the teeth and all that kind of stuff. And then lo and behold, when the government finally came in, they did absolutely the wrong way. They handled exactly the wrong way. They started blasting all the rock music all night long. They got the people so they were tired out. They couldn't get any rest, or they couldn't get sleep. They created the end time conditions that their leader had been telling them were going to happen. And because of that, it wound up as a slaughter. And it was just the wrong way. You can't get people out of cults, and you can't end cults by with force. You have to love them to death. And let them
Ramona, we'll get to that. We'll get to that here in just here after a bit, when we'll talk about after you find yourselves in a cult.
We were talking about the economy of scale of a cult. What usually happens is when it's a tighter knit group, there's a lot more. What you'll do is you'll break it off into the members, and then you'll be the soldiers, and then it starts pyramided out. And the people that for some reason are very loyal because these are good people, the leader has treated them well, and they know what's going on. They know and then what'll happen is the leader does something stupid, in case of Waco, having relations with minors, multiple of them. And they'll step over a line somehow. That's when the police come in. And what happens is they start to expand too quickly. and they don't have enough monitors to make sure that no one goes and whispers in someone else's ear, and then somebody gets out, and that's when it all starts to fall apart.
So basically, they don't build their infrastructure correctly. If they build it a little bit better, then maybe you were saying
it's not just that, but something will happen within. So you have the leader, and then you'll have the lieutenants, and then you'll have the grunts, and something will happen between a lieutenant and a grunt where that Svengali type of control is broken.
Yeah,
and they once they start questioning something, that's your fracture. All you need is that little piece, then it's going to go down.
And that's how the cult leader cements his or her, usually his, position. They used to say, I want your complete loyalty to me, and those who give me complete loyalty, I will reward them, and those who don't, I will punish them. That's a classic cult maneuver. And that's how the hierarchy builds and builds and builds until pretty soon the leader is just in thought, in charge
all the time.
What we have must touch the holy rod in order to be saved.
One of the
what you get. It's like
they use is infomercials. Believe it or not, a cult is a giant infomercial. Tony Robbins running out there, woo, everybody's like, getting all going. Anything that makes you feel good or makes you feel better, and usually your perfect target is. That's why college campuses or schools are perfect, because they're all looking for something. The girl that doesn't think she's pretty, like, oh, you're so beautiful, and you start talking to them like a human being, and they will, they'll follow you any place. The boy that gets talked to by the female cult leader to get him, hey, why don't you hang out with me? Little hits that he's never had before. You're done. They'll do whatever you want at this point. It's crazy.
And there are cult leaders that I talk about in the book that encourage women in the cult to go out and basically try to flirt new members into the club. That whole thing.
Children of God, flirty fishing.
Flirty fishing.
They slept with over almost 240,000 men during their time for conversions.
And isn't it amazing how often sex enters into cults? It becomes part of the thing. When Jim Jones was getting his group started, he went to see Father Divine in New York, and one of the questions he asked him was, Father Divine, Jim Jones wasn't completely over the hill yet. He was still an evangelical pastor, and he was saying, Father Divine, sometimes I have these unholy thoughts about the women of my congregation. And Father Divine looked at him as classic conversation, and he said, well, you must bring these feelings up to the surface where you can deal with them. And that was another part of the beginning. Sex and money and power, it's all tied in there together, and somehow the original idea gets lost. And it's when it does, it is a tragedy. And it's people want to go along with it. It's my group, so it can do nothing wrong, that kind of thing.
Now, Sir Brian's the mortal enemy of the Illuminati, because he's a Templar. So they go against each other. Are the Illuminati, would they be, because Vicky asked that question, do you think that we could consider something like the Illuminati in a way falls under kind of like the pyramid scheme?
Here we go with the here we go.
Well, as I say, I don't want to say any group is a cult. I say, if you find cultic methods being used, and in some ways, if the Illuminati exists, some people say it does, some people say it doesn't. But whatever it is, if they are using cultic methods, then they fit the definition of a cult. If they have a central leader who's craving power, not. But a group can still be nasty and not be a cult. I mean, the cultic methods. That's the key. You have to listen to the leader and see if he's drawing attention just to himself. You have to look at the hierarchy. You have to see the methods they use to basically bring people in. And if that's it, I don't care how high and mighty the group claims to be. If they're using cultic methods, then
Back what you said earlier, you made a good point, because I went to I'm going to call it a cult meeting now because of the way you laid it out.
Timeshare.
No. Even worse.
I've been to those cults too. I should have bought the Hawaiian one.
He had $1 million home, like a couple $1 million home, couple Lamborghinis parked in the yard, and it was basically like a Ponzi scheme cult. Like, hey, if you join this and you sell this product, you get this person to join and this person. You can have all of this today.
Yep.
Well, I didn't get all of that, so
I do a whole chapter in the book on Ponzi schemes, pyramid schemes. Companies, businesses can do the same thing. They bring people in, they demand their total allegiance. The boss wants people working for him who really believe and will push the boss's programs. They say your family's getting in the way. You can't spend that much time with your family because you got to commit. Is it your family or is it the business? And a lot of people choose the business because that's their new family. That's where they're getting their justification. That's where they're getting their props, to keep up their life and everything else. It's something you can go to a high school football game, for heaven's sake, and you can see cultic activities. You go into the theme, and you go into the stadium, and it's everybody's on one side or on the other side. This is my team, or I'm on this side if it's my team, and I'm on that side if it's your team. And they have the music, and our team can do nothing wrong. That wasn't a foul. We wouldn't do that. We're good guys. We wouldn't foul somebody or anything like that. It's just a common human thing. And the trouble with cults is that they take these common human techniques and they put them on steroids and they blow them up. And pretty soon, wow, you got a full-fledged cult on your hand.
You're lighting car dealerships on fire. Something very interesting, Jim. We've been alluding pretty much to a lot of the male leaders throughout, history for cults, which there have been plenty of them. But some of the nastiest ones that I've ever known about are some of the female leaders, and it's not rare. And but when they go in, those ladies go all in, and there's like that male protectiveness over the female, whoever the leader is, and they use that to their advantage. They're very good at manipulating them, and they're just as scary and narcissistic, as everybody else. So
there was a lady behind the Rajneeshis. She was the second in command, and she was the one that was even trying to poison everybody with weaponized beavers.
Nice.
Taking the G artists and taking that, they were wanting to put them in the water supply and poison, this community. And it was like, she was actually the villain.
Yeah.
He was like the figurehead, there's just like the whole happy, like the love guru. And she was actually the super villain behind it.
Yeah. A lot of these people, another aspect of cults is a lot of them are involved in what I like to call crystal balls. The world is always going to end. It's always going to be coming to an end. Jesus is coming back tomorrow, or the Battle of Armageddon will be fought tomorrow, or the end of the world is coming. And if it doesn't come, and you give them a date, and history is full of this, especially in America. You give a date when the world is going to end, and then it doesn't happen. Oh, well, I just misplaced. I'll give you another date, and all this kind of. And eventually, the guy gets into his head, or the woman gets into her head. You know what? It hasn't happened. Maybe I can help bring it about. Maybe I can help. That was the whole idea of this Japanese cult that had the sarin gas in the subways. They were trying to bring about the end of the world because they knew it was coming, and they figured, well, maybe God wants us to do it.
Their leader was blind. It's really interesting. Some of these leaders have defects or something weird. And no, it's I'm not
making up for a lack of
right.
Yeah.
And they said they use it as like, oh, I have the Lord speaks to me and I can see with his eyes, even though I can't see on, whatever. It's very weird. Harlan he posted a comment that you bring astrology into it, which is really important because, there's a lot of, they do use these things. Look, they'll use alignments. They'll use whatever they can use. It's a tough subject, this cult thing. We should just start one already.
Yeah, it is. That's why it's so hard to say this is a cult or that's a cult. there's a lot of groups that might use some cultic methods. For instance, a lot of churches use some kind of cultic methods of the music and the encouragement and the testimonies and the giving to the church and us against them and all this kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean all these churches are cults. It just means that they could be if it crosses that line we were talking about earlier. And there is no one size fits all. You have to handle every situation. Whenever I get somebody talking about this wonderful place they're going, whether it's in business, I got this greatest boss, or I got this greatest pastor in my church, or this greatest rabbi, or this whatever, or there's this certain movie star or whatever, then you have to say, well, be a little careful here. You give somebody too much power, and it can corrupt.
Yeah, because Ariana Huffington was part of the Rajneeshis.
Yeah.
So I mean, you got some big names. I mean, it's not just an easy one. I'm sorry, walked over you there, Chris.
We have a big building off of one of our major roads here in Central Florida, and this guy has been on TV for 20 years. Saying, okay, I won't.
We're all gonna die. Don't go there. I just got out of the hospital. I don't need to fight anybody right now. Really bad area.
They're based in Clearwater. We got it.
No, I'm not talking about them. There's a big building off of I-4.
Headed talking about Disney?
No, headed towards Daytona. And the guy has been on TV for 20 years, gaining followers to help finish his building. His building has not been finished yet. We call it the I-4 eyesore. And he comes on TV 12 o'clock. Please follow me to the light and build my building. And the building's still sitting empty. It hasn't been built yet.
Yeah, I'll tell you that prime time for these guys is after midnight. Prime time.
Yeah, that was the thing. I mean, I really one thing I want to focus before we get too far. You've been touching on it too. Is I like the way you broke down several parts of the book, because you did it almost like a chapter, like bold lettered chapters. Like you broke it down, like there was the 4-part: the looking for love in all the wrong places, the quest to better oneself, longing for community, and extreme vulnerability. And you broke it down like how people can get, find themselves in these things. And then you even broke down to where the different types of cults that you find, and you had that one. And I really liked, because you talked about it when we touched on COVID, the evolving social media. This is actually, it doesn't feel like it, but it's.
Oh, it is. There is a cult of social media. People say, I can't belong to a cult. How could I? I just sit in my room and look at my computer all day by myself. Well, what happened is, for the first time in history of our civilization, human beings can now join together in family without ever meeting each other. They can meet through their computers, and sometimes online. The computer people you'll meet these groups, and at first it'll be wonderful because they'll be answering your questions and they'll be there for you, and no matter what time of day, there's always somebody to respond to your need. And then pretty soon you get more involved with these people and more involved with these people, and then they say, well, now go off to this different website where just the hardcore of us are there. And you can have an online cult and be a member of an online cult and never leave your room, your dark computer screen. Social media can do that. Social media can also unite people where they never could before. You might have 8 or 9 groups scattered all around the country that didn't even know each other were there, and now all of a sudden they can communicate. And when they can communicate like that, all of a sudden you realize, I'm not alone. And social media can bring together lots of good people, but it can bring together lots of bad people too.
You touched on that QAnon.
The coin.
Well,
you touched on that in the book, QAnon, and that's one of the prime examples of how, an idea, because that's one of the things you have is the infatuation with conspiracy theory. You have some of these people that they went so far in that, I mean, you literally had that one guy who was pretending to be, JFK Jr.
Yeah.
And there was people that were following him as he is the Messiah, and he's getting ready to announce himself. And it was just like, and you actually had some people that, I mean, you could see they were fully bought in. I mean, they believed everything he said was the coming, the next coming of Christ.
Mm-hmm. Jim, do you think because of the desensitizing of people and the emotional disconnect that COVID has brought around the entire planet, that cults are now or these groups are now like ripe for an explosion of membership?
I think it's going to happen, and it's such a shame, and it's dangerous. And cults deal in bumper stickers, cults don't outline these great problems that make people think. They want to give you a saying that'll hit, it'll stick in your mind, you'll be there, and that's all there is to it. In my town, in South Carolina, of course, there's an awful lot of conservative churches down here. And I'll never forget going by this one place that had a big bulletin board up, and all it said on the bulletin board was John 3:16. Now, okay, I'm a pastor. I know that John 16 says, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, so that whoever, believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. But what does that do to somebody who doesn't know anything about them? Do they really think, the word John, somebody's name, and a colon, or a comma rather than in 3 and a colon and 16, they're not going to know what that means. It's in speak for the cult, and so anybody who understands that, I know exactly what they mean. But is that really going to push your message? How are people going to know what you're talking about? Vicky says, look at the Elvis followers. He's not dead. And some say that it's, 46 years.
Yeah.
Vicky, everybody knows Elvis is still alive. He just went to another planet.
I literally just saw Elvis this morning. Looked exactly like Elvis serving eggs at a local place over here.
Well, I saw him, so I know, but it must be real.
Well, I've noticed traveling down south from the north. Sorry, Craig, I didn't mean to.
No. Go ahead.
I've been through Western PA and a lot of PA, and as you go down, I actually enjoy. I see these signs like I've seen save the rosary. I've seen things, Jesus died for your sins. And there's a lot of what I've noticed on the trip down now is people still do listen to AM and FM radio. And there's a lot of these little groups that are broadcasting their sermons, and it does pass the time. And if once you start resonating with somebody, like I really, one of my favorite people to watch, actually, although he got a little bad right now, was Joel Osteen. The reason why he was so good is he's very, very charming, and he only waited to the last minute to put in Lord or Jesus. It's very interesting. Another guy that is very charismatic is Creofold Dollar. He's still doing the preaching, but they touch on things, and you're like, they pick up on all this stuff that really resonates with you. Yeah, I had a bad day. Exactly. That's what happened. Then you start listening longer and longer. The next thing you know, you're reading some kind of gruel wearing a tunic, in Tennessee. But
well, you can see the development too of how it moves away. I love to look at the religious history of the United States. Started out separation of church and state. And then, it began to grow until pretty soon politics began to enter into the church a little more. And then along came Jerry Falwell, who famously said, we have to get people saved and registered to vote. Which is a little more. Now that not talking about separation of church and state anymore. I mean, voting is great, but we have to get people saved and then have them vote. Now there's a lot of pastors out there who are saying, God wants you to come to church with your Bible in one hand and your gun in the other. And it's just gradually, step by step, inch by inch, we move away from the founders of these great religions. And what we wind up with eventually is cults. Whenever you've got an organization that uses cultic methods and that has a charismatic leader that people will be willing to follow to the grave, then you're going to have the possibilities of cults.
Got to be saved to be.
You got to be saved to vote. Only if you vote the correct way will you be saved.
I couldn't stop. But yeah.
Depending on what church it is, will determine which vote it required for that salvation. So that's what I said. It could be, it could go either way. It doesn't determine one side. It just the location.
Can I just ask one more question of Jim for a second?
Sure.
There?
Yeah.
Coming from your religious background, how upsetting are you that this takes place because there's so many people being victimized, being a servant of the Lord?
Yeah.
I mean, you're putting a spotlight on it, and I think the book is a fantastic and what you're doing, but it's got to be like, you're coming from a perspective like, I'm trying to help you, I'm trying to bring you closer and show you the power of God. And it, how do, for you personally, how do you deal with this? Because emotionally, you must be having a really tough time with it.
That's why I was so depressed by the time I finished writing it. You give your whole lifetime to something, and then all of a sudden you see it wrenched away in a lot of ways, and not just religion. I see the same thing in political aspects of this country. I see the same thing in a lot of my friends, a lot of my families, and families that I've worked with have just been torn apart by the fact that one person goes to one church and one person decides to leave and go to another church, or one person, a family has been, say, Republican all their life, and then somebody goes and votes Democratic. Well, that's terrible. Or somebody likes a certain kind of music, and now somebody else wants some other kind of music playing at Thanksgiving family dinner, and it is just it is discouraging. It is discouraging. I know we're running kind of short on time here, but I think there's one question that we have to point out. Somebody asked earlier.
Simona did. Yeah.
Suppose I'm in a cult, or suppose a friend is in a cult. What do I do? Sad to say, I mean, I'd love to be able to give you a formula. Just say do this and it'll work, but it won't. If there are some basic principles that have to be followed. If you or a person is involved in a cult, if they are coming to the point where they decide on their own that they have to leave this cult somehow, you have to help them, but you have to make sure you don't just help them out of the cult. You have to help them into something else, because the cult is meeting a need. It's giving them family. It's giving them support. It's giving them something to believe in. It's giving them like-minded people. If a person can't find something like that, then they will probably be either susceptible to going right back into the cult, or going into a different cult that offers something a little bit different. Just hopping from one cult to another, and so it's. Yeah, I wish I had an easy answer. I wish I had a bumper sticker answer.
Well, that was the thing. Reading it from when I was reading that part in the book too, is because one of the things that these people leave for is because they're missing something. Yeah. There's something that they need to belong, and so a lot of families, they're like, "Well, I'm just going to go get them out." Well, there's a reason why they left to begin with. There was something that was missing in that whole aspect of that family dynamic that led these people to break off. They found something that they weren't getting. So the one thing I was looking forward to asking you is, so is there something on the family where we almost need to have, like, we'll say like Austin just ran off to a cult and we're trying to track him down.
He is.
We can't just drag him back. It would be one of those, we'd have to figure out, I feel like we have to figure out why that person left first before you're going to even come close to setting up a scenario where they're going to feel like they want to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think it's bad enough for someone who joined a cult willingly, what about those poor people who are born into a cult, whose parents are active cult members, and they're born into it, and it's all they've known their whole life, and now they grow up and they want something different. Now what do they do? I'm in the Beards cult.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how you get
exactly.
Yeah, you can pull me out of this and shave my beard. I'll just grow it back.
But how do you deal with I'm one of the things that's very interesting. How does the ones that grow up within the cult where it's 24/7 around them, this is all they've known, know that it's not good?
Yeah.
Where does
Some
the catalyst come? With that world.
Some do. Some people just begin to think for themselves, and one thing leads to another, and they say, "I've got to get out of here." But it's tough. It really, really is tough, and you can't. I just can't emphasize it enough. You can't pull somebody out of something without giving them something else that original something was meeting in their lives. It takes patience, and you don't always win. Sometimes you lose.
Because Mark had asked that question. It's like, what's the difference between somebody who joins and somebody who's born into it? And it's just like some do something like the children of God. We just mentioned it. Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan. They ended up leaving. They're born into this, thing. It's just, but some, in a way, you can see. Like Rose McGowan, you can see the stuff she went through. So there is lasting effects, that these, they don't just come out like, hey, I'm free. They actually, there's stuff that really has this psychological effect on people in every aspect. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
well, we can join Austin's cult. He's in the truck club. So if we get the trucks and we start working on trucks, it will be in his cult.
My cult, it depends. I have like 6 cult meetings this week. So,
we touched country. We touched on this a little bit too. It's like there's some of these churches that have. I don't like to. All joking aside, you don't label them just directly like thing, but they have some of these aspects where it has that appearance just because of some of the things that are required of a member to do in order to be a part of this thing. It's one of those, most people, like when you go to a church, all you have to do is just show up. You don't have to wear special clothing. You don't have to wear, do certain things. You have to be you have to do these certain activities in order to be part of this. When you get something like the Mormon church, where there's certain criterias in order for you to even go into someplace like the temple, if you're not this thing. And so that's why it feels like there's this exclusionary thing where if you don't do these things, I can't be part of it. So it has that feeling like it's a draw. But one of the things I got from them. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Well, I'm going to say every religion has that to a certain extent. You take a Catholic believer who is used to a certain kind of worship service with organ and choirs and all this kind of stuff and classical music. And I've had them say, well, that church down the street, they've actually got a guitar up front. Why, they're nothing but a cult, and it's.
I don't mind your cult there, Jared.
Yeah,
my wife would not be thrilled about it. But yeah, I'm. When does it go from going in and hearing the good word and sermons and maybe some good music and just singing songs to handling serpents? I mean, when does that or drinking arsenic? I mean, there's a huge leap in a lot of these on the fairly normal religion to jump from hell, this was a great, wow, what he said was true, to, oh my God, I got bit by 3 rattlesnakes, but I've got the, Jesus.
Well, it says in the Gospel of Mark, in the last chapter of the Gospel of Mark, they shall handle serpents and not be hurt. So if you handle serpents and you get hurt, must be your fault. You must be a sinner.
Well, that was his last chapter. So
Bob didn't believe enough.
Well, yeah,
you got bit.
Yeah, it's tough thing to be in,
Yeah, it is a tough field, and that's why I was so depressed when I finished dealing with it. I'd love to say there was an easy answer that you can fit on a bumper sticker.
Yeah,
I can imagine it was like that for you, because it's like the people that do on serial killers. It's like you almost have to have a decompression point.
Yeah,
because you've dealt with so much things. You're just like, the fact of, you can see the destruction it has on families.
Yeah.
I mean,
it is tough.
Do you going on with your you do still do services and or
no, I have I'm still an ordained minister, and I haven't set foot in a church for 15 years.
Hey, I'm an ordained minister myself,
and I am not I am not complaining about it. I mean, I'm not criticizing the church. I have seen in my own case and in other people's cases that a lot of people get some wonderful blessings out of it, and a church offers family and friends and security. I never encourage anybody to leave their church or their body of worship unless it becomes very obvious that the person realizes, wait a minute, somebody has crossed the line. I've got to do something different.
Okay, one more thing for you, Jim. In your time after writing this book, have you ever come across some of the cults you just wrote about, like in person, and they know who you are, and someone talked about being targeted by cults, and you may have spilt the beans, and they like, well, we're not happy with you, Jim.
Yeah, surprisingly, that hasn't happened in the religious sense yet. I'm sure it will, but surprisingly, I have been, well, let's say, overly criticized by people who belong to political cults.
Okay.
And I guess I'm the liberal Yankee or something like that. And I remember the good old days when I was living up in Massachusetts, and Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House. Tip O'Neill was that flaming liberal. And yet Ronald Reagan from California was the ultra conservative president. They didn't agree on anything politically, but they could still walk into the same room, kick back, put their feet up, share a beer, and tell Irish stories and laugh. They respected each other personally, even though they didn't agree politically. Well, those days are almost long gone in this country right now. It's just, there's a huge divide. People, they don't want to attack your ideologies. They don't want to attack your ideas. They want to attack your character. And yeah, I've had some of that, and it hurts.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was wondering.
It hurts.
Well, I mean, there's some people still a part of the mask cult. They wear a mask everywhere. I mean, I guess that's going to be an ongoing cult thing forever now.
One of the problems is when you do research and get information from like hundreds of sources, it's not mainstream media, and you put information forward. One, you're a labeled conspiracy theorist, but if you have an objective opinion and look back at what's been taking place, the people that have been labeled conspiracy theorists are up by 1,000 points in this game, compared to the ones that aren't. I've noticed that I've warned people about certain things that are looking like they're going to happen, shortages, supplies. And when you get stuff back thrown in your face, well, I'm not going to give people those poison. I'm like, you get to a certain point where you're like, I'm just trying to help you, but and you feel terrible when you don't care anymore. Like, look, take my advice or don't. I don't care.
Yeah, if you listen to people's language nowadays, you'll hear the word fear a lot. I'm afraid this is going to happen. I'm afraid that's going to happen. Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm afraid I have to tell you this, and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And that's when I like to go back to a Bible verse. How do you get rid of fear? Well, if you want a good Bible verse, 1 John chapter 1, perfect love casts out fear. We're a long way from even trying for any kind of love, let alone perfect love in this country. And that's if we want to get rid of the fear of the future, we have to reach out to other people in love. We're in it together, whether we want it to be or not. We just have to get over this character assassination at every step of the way. And I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think one of my friends who passed away, he was a Lutheran, and the difference between Martin Luther and everybody else is you don't have to come to church to pray. God is everywhere. I mean, I've heard that before in different. I was born in one religion. Being ordained minister, I take in the consideration of multiple different, Old and New Testament and a lot of things, because it resonates. And I've always believed from long time ago that God hears you everywhere. And that you're talking about that love, that perfect love. It's just, if we all started doing something like that, they wouldn't have this political stuff, all this craziness would just go away, because they would never be able to break that bond.
You can't legislate morality. You can't legislate ethics. You can't legislate love. And yet, if we could all begin, every single one of us in this world, if we could just begin a little bit, just become a little better, we could change the world overnight. But is it going to happen? No, but it's the easiest way, and it doesn't cost anything.
Right.
You know, we could eliminate all the money that we're spending to protect ourselves from others if we just reach out. But of course, it's not going to happen. I mean, I know it's naive, but hey, I'm 77 years old. I've earned the right to be a little naive if I want.
I don't think it's naive. I think you just you have so much information behind you from experience that you're like, you know what? After a while, you have to let your kids fall down and scrape their knee and pick themselves back up. You can't just be there the whole time. That's what creates the problem, I think. You know, I try to every day when I interact with somebody, you know, I just say the same thing. Have a blessed day. Thank you for your help. Have a blessed day. Even if they were the worst individual on the planet, they didn't really do a good job. Because if one of those people I interact with, or one of them, you know, I really appreciate your help. Thank you. Have a blessed day. If that changes one person, that's a trickle.
Yeah.
If two people that day change, then that's it starts to open the floodgates. You know.
Yeah.
And having what I just went through, I had a couple hundred people send me prayers and blessings in Jesus' name, in Allah's name, and you know what? I take them all because it's still, if you just prayed for 1 minute, you wouldn't need a cult.
I'm writing a book now again for Visible Link Press on near-death experiences, and I'm amazed. I'm amazed at the number of people who have had near-death experiences who have actually died and passed over and come back, and their lives are completely changed. And that's why I sometimes throw my hands up in the air and say, "That's what the world needs. If we all die, see the other side, and come back, we can change the world." You know, if we all have a near-death experience.
Well, because you know, it's that the veil, like when you go to heaven, that near-death experience, and everybody says a lot of that they experience the unconditional love. It's just pure love. There's no worry or nothing. And then you come back to this S-hole and you're like, oh God. Electric bills too. What do the kids need? Do they need dentures? No, they need braces. You know, it's $10,000. It gets depressing after a while. I'm like, couldn't you just left me? You know, I can't wait to see that one. That's going to be a good one. Greg, book them now.
Okay. Oh, gladly. I really enjoy it. I said we that's why I said when I saw the book, it's like I definitely wanted to have you back on, because it was like a couple of two subjects, you know, just like I really enjoyed the book Censoring God, and I said, and then this one was the same thing. It's just because we got a couple of comments, and that was one of the things I really latched on when we had you that last time. It's just there's not this you can't be religious thing. It's just I've had since I was in seminary school for the thing. I started to realize that organized church was not the way. It's like I don't have to be in these walls. I don't have to be in these congregations to have some relationship with who I feel is the creator. You know, who I feel like I said, I don't have to have this. You know, and it was just kind of at that one point, it's just like those shackles just went away. And I was just like, I went my path. Of course, a lot of people I know, they're trying to save me from my eternal damnation.
Yeah.
For casting free those shackles, but I'm like, I got to tell you, I feel free. I don't know what to tell you.
I get a lot of that too. I still consider myself a Christian, and yet there's an awful lot of people in the Christian church who probably think I'm not anymore. I'm not any Christian any longer. But on the other hand, what would happen if the founders of some of these great religions, what would happen if Moses or Muhammad or Jesus or the Buddha or Confucius or Lao Tzu, what if they came back and saw what has been built in their name? And what if they took all of that? What if we took all of that money that just goes to supporting buildings and structure and infrastructure for these kinds of things and contributed that toward things that would really change the world? You know, churches are closing every day in this country. I don't know the latest number, but that you know, a lot of churches are just falling, and a lot of it is because they can't raise enough money to take care of their buildings, and it's a shame.
Everywhere.
Yeah. Crystal Palace is a good example of just the obscene use of church money.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that was just, it's like, how many food banks could that have built around the country?
Yeah.
See, that's, I mean, I've often thought about that. If Jesus came back, Buddha, Muhammad, whatever, and they saw what was being done in their name, first and foremost, whoever the leader is then that sees them would probably try to take them out, 100%, because it's a control. After a while, it's a control thing, and it's big bucks. But I could see them, laying everything, pillars of salt, and this is where, isn't this the beginning of how Armageddon starts? Like you're pissing God off, and kind of, sort of, like I'm gonna rectify this right now.
That's actually a great way to phrase that, Sarah.
Very good.
Religion is just the politics of God.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's basically, Methodist, Lutheran, Protestant. It's like it's like a political party.
Yeah.
Yep.
When I first wrote the Quantum Akashic Field, subtitled a guide to out of body experience for the astral traveler, when I first wrote that book, I had an awful lot of people. After having done a lot of shows and like this and others like it, a lot of people have said, what's the difference between religion and spirituality? And I don't think people in the country today are leaving spirituality at all. I think it's stronger than ever. I think they are leaving religion, because religion is the dogma and the doctrinal fences that we build around the original vision of the founder. And I think it's come a long way, but it's
I've noticed that too. I mean, I think what you have now is when people say, well, what religion are you? Like, I'm very spiritual, because in a true, if you're really going to take some of these great leaders and messiahs that have come over different generation and lifetimes, like you just said, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, Arnold Schwarzenegger, whatever. Everyone, they always come with a similar theme, but there are certain little nuances that are exclusive to Buddha, to so on.
Yeah.
And if you take all this, they're all saying the same thing, but if you take it all into consideration and become more spiritual and see them as a representation of the one, or I don't like calling it source. I always call it God. You really are become your life does get better. I'm not preaching, but
I've noticed the question, do I consider myself a spiritualist? I don't like to use the word spiritualist, because that implies that there is a group. I consider myself a spiritual person, and I spend an awful lot of time every day now in meditation and all the rest. But so I love the idea of spirituality, but to be honest, I have a little trouble with religion nowadays.
Yeah, it's in that timing, Ramona's question. So what religion are you? I'm a follower of the teachings of Jesus, and it's like, I go, so where we, because I'm following on to where I found Jesus as an amazing teacher, a prophet, type thing. Like I said, I just don't know if I'm on the camp now, the Son of God, the deity. I don't know if I'm there anymore.
Yeah, and that's a huge. This is a huge problem with it, because I have individuals. I have no problem with Jesus Christ whatsoever, and coming from one religion and different tribes of Israel, I used to get slack because I'm also an ordained minister, and they say, "Well, you say a lot of Jesus stuff. And aren't you Jewish?" And I said, yes, so is Jesus. So what's the problem? I see him as a messenger, a deliverer, just like other in the past. And people have to get past this, my us versus them mentality.
There's I have a YouTube page. If you go to my website, you can find the YouTube page. And there's a YouTube out there, a video that we did some time ago. One of the videos that we did was called, I think, "One Ring to Rule Them All." I didn't invent that phrase, by the way, but it talks about how the fact that all of these world religions, and I go into all the big five and a couple of others, how they all began with an initial shamanic vision.
Oh, there we are.
And it's down at the bottom of that page. If you kind of scroll down, you can find the little the links there, and a little more, just a little bit more, right in here. Oh, well, there's a link there with the icon, the Facebook icon, and the YouTube icon. You can.
Oh, there it is. That one.
Yeah, and you can find that down there. And when you go to that page, it really helps to show how much the different religions of the world have in common today, because they are all founded on basically a shamanic vision, a vision that they're, Moses at the burning bush, Jesus in the desert, Muhammad in the cave, Buddha underneath the bo tree, and all those kinds of things. It was an initial shamanic vision. And then what happened with that vision was his followers, all the followers of these people came along, and they built a religion around it over the years. And now, in some cases, we've moved very far away from where we should be, where the founder's vision was.
I'm not sure why it didn't show up, but here it is.
It's actually fantastic. I'm going to say something right now. Jim, you have the perfect voice for it. There's a pleasantry, a calmness, and come on, it's okay. No, but your mannerisms, it's really great. You should probably start a cult at this point.
I was going to say, I'll start a cult with it, and maybe
I'll follow.
Give donations to Jim at the cult. But this is, when you meet somebody, even when you're younger, you get like, oh, he reminds me of Santa. He's like, oh, he's got it. I'm not trying to belittle anything, but it gets people in touch with their childhood, and you can see how easy it is to, like, wow, he's such a nice guy. He's really great.
Well,
nobody asked me to deplete my bank account, but it's okay.
So Vicky's asked, have you thought about doing an audiobook?
Yes, I should do an audio.
Well, my first work of fiction, what came out about a year ago, it was called The Wizard in the Wood. And I wanted an audiobook from it. And so I did my first audiobook. And now I'm doing another one. It's a book called Sabuko and Me, about spirit guides. And so I'm starting to do my own audiobooks now.
And I apologize in advance for this, Jim, but you have like such a nice mannerism. I'm like, then when they said you should do audiobooks, I said yes, but they should be like dirty audiobooks. Oh. And then you said the first one I did was The Wizard in the Wood, and I was like, oh my god,
The Wizard in the Wood.
Yeah, it's led to some great things though. I have a partnership, first of all, with my daughter, who I built her a house next door to mine out here in the woods where we live, and she does all the technical work that on this kind of stuff. But I have a long distance partnership with a long distance friend who I've never met except online. He's a musician from India named Ajit Padmanabh, and he's been doing the music for my audiobooks. And it's been fun. I really have enjoyed it.
That's great. That is, what a great concept for the audiobook to have the right. I can hear that too. I know where you're going with this, being musically inclined. That's a genius idea.
Well, it was something I wanted to do, and now that I'm retired, I have the time, and it meant learning something new. I was a musician for all my life, so I've done a lot of work in the studio, but I never knew what the engineers were doing on the other side of the glass. Now I had to learn that.
Yeah, that's a tough little task to learn it, but sometimes it's a baptism by fire. I just have this vision of Jim, like, in my old days, I played guitar, and there he is in a death metal band.
Oh boy.
Awesome.
I said, Jim, everybody, American Cults, Cabals, Corruption, and Charismatic Leaders. It is a really good, easy read. I mean, as I said, there's lots of call outs. There's lots of pictures for people that need, the companions that way, because it saves you the trouble of Googling as you read it. But it's one I used it for that show because there was a couple of ones, and it's nice to have the different resources at your fingertips that you're just able to pull. So I really appreciated that. And so everybody, Amazon.com, you can go there, click, buy that thing. You can also go, I think if I'm not mistaken, there was a link for yours too for the book.
Yeah. If you go to my webpage, jimwillis.net, and go to books, And all my books are listed there along with reviews. It'll tell you whether you be interested or not, whether they're good or bad or whatever. And you can just click. You can click on any one of those, and by clicking on the thing, it'll take you right to the Amazon.
Oh wow, Merlin, the pagans. Nice, very interesting.
Yeah, Merlin is the first book of a trilogy I did on the rise of ego, which is closely related to what we've talked about today. It's the rise of ego on our side, and I based the trilogy on 3 different stories: Merlin, Robin Hood, and Story of Little Snow White.
Craig, you got to get Jim to come out to the Beardoism retreat and discuss.
Yeah, just
make sure the music is playing, and
he'll be
the collection plates.
Yeah, he'll be the keynote speaker right at the, like I said, right at the crescendo. You're going to see that nice little plate come around. Yeah, come around. It's just, this is.
It's always it's always good to meet with you guys. I really enjoyed it, and hope to.
Well, I appreciate that. Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, let us know when that one comes. That book is getting close to. It's just, and then Ouroboros. Hey, welcome. Yeah, you made it right at the end. But definitely watch it on there. You'll enjoy this. Just Penny Van. That's somebody new that we haven't seen. Really appreciate you checking it out. Lynn Monet, she is going to be on the show here coming up here in I think a couple weeks. We're going to have her on talking actually about some of the near-death experience.
Great.
Too. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Vicky, Ramona, Julie, Sarah, Harlan, Country Boy Cryptids, Abe's, thank you guys, everybody, for watching. Please go support Jim, pick up some of these books. Like I said, this.
Can we give him an applause for coming on the show?
Yes. Censoring God, American Cults. Like I said, alone. I've read those too. Highly recommend.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate it.
Yes. So it's like King, thanks.
Good to talk with you all.
Yeah. Tell your daughter too. Thanks again for all of the help, with getting this lined up too.
I will do that for sure. Really good.
Shout out for Invisible Ink Press as well. They're the publisher. Do that. So, all right, everybody. Burt Radio. You will hear this show rebroadcast next Wednesday again at 11 p.m. courtesy of Ron. He will put that out there. Just I want to thank everybody for comments. Every time you share the show, that is really big for us, because it seems like such a silly thing, but just a simple. Right up here on the top, if you see all the icons, just simply reacting to it and some comments, they really help, and just sharing the show. I mean, it's just that really helps us. I mean, who doesn't like money? We like to throw around the collection plate, when after the music's playing. We'll take the subscribers, we'll take the stars. We're not ashamed to beg for money, but it's when we appreciate that. If you can't, just the simple fact of sharing, liking, and just commenting. But definitely go support Jim and his works. There's nothing quite like it. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was going to say thank you.
It's been
fun.
There's nothing quite like having book sales and great reviews to motivate the author to keep doing what they're doing. So it's definitely do that. So, but everybody. Now, at the end of this, I'm actually going to play the correct thing that I, instead of like when I tried to start the show with the wrong thing. So, hey, we all off our game sometimes, but definitely go to Mixler.com, go set up that account, support Radio, go to jimwillis.net, support Jim. It's like I said, real quick. You saw how easy it was to get right to the Amazon thing, and that book's on its way. So by the time this intro is done, you could order that book with one click buy there on Amazon. So listen, go out there and show the love. I want to see these book sales right now. Show me these book sales.
It just went up for sale yesterday, so it's brand new.
I appreciate being one of the first interviews too. That's awesome. So all right, Jim, thanks. Okay. Have a great night. Send the love to the family.
Real good. We'll be seeing you now.
All right.
Thank you, Jimmy.